Hello and welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book, Level 1. This video is Lesson 21. We are on page 25. So we're going to learn something new today, slurs and legato playing. So at the top of page 25, what is a slur? Well, it's a curved line over or under notes on different lines or spaces. And that's the key word right there, different. A few pages ago, page 21 of our book, you learned about ties. Now, a tie is also a curved line, but it connects two notes that are the exact same pitch. Okay, you can have a slur, which means to play legato, on two notes that are different pitches. So, if they're the same pitch, it's a tie. You hold it. You don't play that note again. But if it's two different notes, say it's G and A, I connect those notes. I'm not going to play G and then A like that. Now I exaggerated. But you hear the break? You don't want the break. You want it to be smooth. There's no break. So that's called legato playing, smoothly connected. Now what we could do is actually take our right hand and let's take our C position and let's start with our thumb and play C, D, E, F, G. Now what I want you to do is play them purposely broken so you can hear the break between the notes like this. So that's not smooth, that's not legato. That's kind of choppy actually. So if those notes were written down on the music, and I put a curved line over all five of those notes, that would mean to connect them, to play legato, smooth and connected like this. I didn't play the notes any slower, I didn't play them faster, I didn't play them louder, I didn't play them softer. But what I did do is I connected them. So if I really examine connecting notes, what that means is, if I lift this C before I hit the D, and I have that little break in there, that's not connecting. But to connect it, as soon as that C, while that C is coming up actually, I'm coming down on the D. You see, it's almost a simultaneous motion, this up-down motion. That connects the sound. So a lot of it is just listening. Listen. Is there a break between the notes? Or did I connect the notes? So, but if you really want to know, breaking that down, how does it work? There it is. It's about coming off of one note and going down on the next note pretty much at the same time. Okay? Now, be careful, don't overthink this too much. I'm really explaining it, but you don't want to have this happen. I exaggerate once again, but you see how I'm still lingering on that C when the D's already down. That's not legato anymore. That's just called, I don't know what that's called, mush, I guess. But you don't want that. So, legato playing, smooth, connected, and it'll be described in the music with those slurs. Now, generally, you'll see a slur over a large grouping of notes. So in this music here, what can I share? Look at the left hand in the first line. All those notes in the first line, left hand, have this long slur. So they're all going to be connected like this. So notice there were no breaks between any of those notes. It wasn't. So you can hear the difference. So it adds a lot to musical expression. It certainly adds a much more pleasing sound. And in this book, if it has a legato marking, we'll follow it. There will come a point in music where you may not see legato markings, and you probably still want to play legato. It depends on the style of the piece. Now, if it's a style of music that's meant to be choppy, of course, you won't do legato. But there will be a lot of pieces of music where you're going to want to play legato, even if the music doesn't call for it. So this is something very important you really want to learn. Okay, now that we've talked about that, let's look at our piece of music. What can I share? So in the beginning, as we take a look at the very beginning, we're in 3/4 time. So every measure gets 3 counts. The left hand is important here at the very beginning because it's the left hand that has our melody. So generally, when you see a piece of music and you have single notes in one hand, that's probably the hand that's got the melody. Think about a singer. A singer can't sing a chord, but that singer sings one note at a time. So your left hand is singing. It's doing the singing. You could even see the lyrics underneath the bass clef. The right hand has our chords, which is our accompaniment. So the left hand in the first 2 lines is our more important hand. So we're going to start with the left hand, still in our C position. 3rd finger is our starting note on E. So at the beginning, it's just E, F, G, down to C. 3 counts on this C because it's a dotted half note. Next measure, D. Again, dotted half note. And then E, dotted half note. The second line repeats the same thing. But our last measure goes back down to C. That's the only difference in the left hand in those 2 lines. It's mezzo forte, so rather loud volume, but not too loud. It's not forte. So here's how the left hand goes in those 2 lines. Now you may have noticed, if you really paid attention, at the end of the first line, I did put in a little bit of a break. I gave it a little lift. Now, if you were to sing this piece, we would call that a breath. You would sing this first line, what can I share with you? Take a breath, and then you'd sing the second line. So it's really good for pianists to do the same thing. There's a lot of ways to describe this. You could describe it as, you could say, you took a breath as well. It's kind of odd saying that since your hand doesn't breathe, but it's kind of called maybe shaping the phrase. So this legato marking in the left hand, some people also call that a phrase. Like a phrase is a musical sentence. So you don't want to break the sentence, but at the end of it, you want to signal that it's come to an end. We're starting a new sentence, a new phrase, and a little break or a little breath is a good way to do that. So I'm going to play it one more time. Listen for that. So the music, doesn't call for that. There's no mention of it in the book, but just a little heads up that's a nice little thing you might want to consider adding to your musical skill. It'll take your music to the next level. The right hand on these 2 lines simply plays chords. There's only 2 chords in this entire song. The C chord, C, E, and G, which is found on measure 2 of the first line and the second line. And the G7 chord, which is found on measure 3 of both lines. And back to the C chord on the last measure of both lines. Okay, now the rhythm. On the second measure, in fact, all these measures, it's the same rhythm. The chords play on beat 2 and 3. Okay, so starting on the second measure, our right hand goes like this. 1. So what happens on beat 1 in the music? That's where the left hand plays. If you look down at the left hand, notice it played those dotted half notes on beat 1. You're holding it, the right hand comes in on beat 2 and 3. It does the exact same thing on the second line. So let's play both hands, first two lines. Now it's going to be pretty challenging putting these hands together because they're actually doing two different things musically. Your left hand, as I mentioned, is the melody. It's very important to play that pretty strong. Let it sing out. It's also very smooth because of the legato. The right hand is not quite as important. Those chords are just an accompaniment, and they don't need to be smooth, and they don't need to be as loud. So the two hands are doing two very different things. So the good news again is your left hand is holding those notes. So if you go slow enough, I think you can talk your way through it. So again, at the beginning, you're nice and smooth in the left hand. And then you can say, okay, right hand, just think about that by itself. Now, strong left hand. That wasn't strong. Left hand, right hand chords. Strong left hand. So you can kind of, talk your way through it if you go very slowly. And I recommend doing that. The piece is moderately slow, so you don't have to really go too fast on this. But as with all pieces of music, start out slow, accuracy first. Over time, you can then speed it up. Now, the last two lines of the piece are essentially a reverse of the first two lines, meaning third line, the right hand has the melody. It's the same thing. All the same notes, all the same rhythms. Same thing on the bottom line. And the bottom line is the same as the second line. It goes back to C rather than E on the last note. Notice there's another measure at the end of the bottom line, and we have a tie. So you can see now the difference between the slur and the tie. In the last line, you've got that long curved slur above all the notes. So play all those notes smoothly and connected. But the last two notes are both middle C, and they have a different line joining those, and that's your tie, meaning that you're going to hold it down in both measures for a total of 6 counts. So back on line 3, the left hand has those chords that your right hand played at the very beginning. Your C chord in measure 2, your G7 in measure 3. When you get to the very end, the last two measures of the fourth line, again, you have an extra measure. Okay, so that extra measure of a dotted half note. Notice it says slower. So basically, really what that means is slowing down. So your tempo is going to sort of slow down and then sort of fade out. So those last 3 chords take a little more time playing each one of them. And then on that final measure, probably a very slow 3 beats. It'll make more sense if I start at the bottom line and demonstrate how that goes. So starting at the 4th line with both hands. So you see how we slow down there at the end. Okay, the other thing about the 3rd and 4th line is the dynamics. At the beginning of the 3rd line, there's a P there, piano, which means soft. So in contrast with the first 2 lines that are mezzo forte, your last 2 lines of the music will be soft. They'll be quiet. All right, so from the very beginning, this is what Can I Share sounds like. Okay, so one more thing before we end. I forgot to mention on the last two lines that playing that quietly is not necessary. You can play a little bit louder than I played it there. The more important thing is the contrast. You want the first two lines to be louder. You want the last two lines to be softer. Now, playing it as soft as I did is actually really tricky, especially with those chords in the left hand. It takes a lot of control to get to that point. So if it's not quite that soft, that's okay. But like I said, the contrast between the first half of the piece and the second half is the most important thing. Learn the last the last two lines loud. Learn them loud first. It's always good to learn loud. Make sure you're confident of those notes in both hands. Then you can work on backing down the volume quieter and quieter and quieter. But it's really hard to learn new notes soft at first, so I do recommend learning it loud. Always add the dynamics last or near the end if you're not ready to add them in the beginning. Okay, so I think that covers this piece. So remember, the new thing we learned today was the slur. The slur connects two or more notes that are different pitches, and it means to play those pitches smoothly. A tie, as review, connects two of the exact same pitch, and that just means you keep holding that pitch down.